far too much information on this slide for me ever to possibly cover it in any detail, but as I said earlier, you've heard about some of the very important developments in this community, in this country, from some of those who are the pioneers. From my perspective, I think the key message is that there's a tremendous amount of both interest and skill and talent and important experience in laying the foundation and framework for us to, as a community and as a country, to move forward and to take advantage of the experience that's been had, learn from the experience in terms of what's worked and what hasn't, and to continue to build. And that's just a bit more. I mean, I guess I just highlighted a couple of the most recent and significant developments. We know that there are a number of groups that have sought permission to establish banks in Canada. It's a very, very challenging status to enjoy, a very high threshold, but it signals that there's some individuals, groups, organizations that have spent a fair bit of time and energy thinking about how they would become a more significant participant in the sector. And I'd say, notwithstanding what I'm sure many have felt, those of them who've been involved, that it's a frustrating and difficult and a very challenging experience. I'd say, what you've done is important for the development of the sector, and we will do what we can to be supportive in a general sense. And then I think you heard earlier today from Guy David, who wrote a report for the CMHC, a very, very important piece of work, very well researched and very thoughtful, and a further signal that we have an opening and welcoming environment, a sophisticated legal environment, but certainly not one which fundamentally is inconsistent with the opportunity in the retail space, certainly in the residential mortgage space, to be encouraging and promote the development of a serious and important Islamic menu of products and services for Canadians. And then very briefly, TFSA and Islamic finance. Early last year, we had a visit from International Financial Services London, the organization which, much like TFSA, is involved in helping to promote the financial services community in London. Obviously, our role is in Toronto, as a leading financial center. And we heard how the regulatory environment in London and the UK had actually contributed to the development of a more welcoming environment. I'm sure it's not unique in the history of the development of financial services, but it's not typical for regulators to actually be at the forefront of the development of new products or services or structures. I think those of us who were in Toronto were very impressed by what we heard, and we recognized that the experience in London was very much an experience that we in Canada could adapt and develop in a way that would help promote Toronto and Canada in a similar manner. And we formed a working group. My colleague Steve Watts and I are co-chairing the process. We've developed an open and welcoming consultative effort to try to draw in people from the community who are interested in the process. And I would certainly say to any of you who are in the audience today, if you're not involved and would like to do so, please make yourselves known to us. And we have developed a report which is yet to receive final board approval from the TFSA, but we expect it to be received shortly, which really outlines the challenges and opportunities and signals very clearly that we think that Toronto can and should become the North American Center for Islamic finance. With that, I'll pass along to Steve to take you through some of the opportunities and challenges.
Thank you, Jeff. Good afternoon, and a special welcome to our international visitors to Toronto. So what is the business case for Islamic finance in Canada? As some of you know, we have a large and growing Muslim population. We have some stats over here based on the last census, and that is likely to grow even further. Some of the stats here are pretty striking in terms of the average age of this community, as well as the education levels. Not to just restrict Islamic finance to the Muslim population, and there is, as Omar indicated earlier, his application is about for bank licenses, widening this to encompass a multicultural bank, which would be open and welcoming to anyone of any faith really who wants to invest on an ethical basis, or bank with an ethical bank. So that would potentially increase the demographic even more. If you contrast the Canadian, just a Muslim population, then to the one in the UK, with their Muslim population of just under 2 million, and the percentage of, as a percentage of their national population, the UK has 6 Islamic financial institutions covering wholesale, retail banking, and insurance as well. With the first one, Islamic Bank of Britain, having been formed in 2004. So they have 6, Canada has none, and I think that's the business case that we are putting forward over here. Where things stand right now, as Jeff mentioned, there are a number of applications before the regulator, the banking regulator, and they are dealing with that application process. The million-dollar question is, are these going to be approved? Last year, there was some debate as to whether a policy review needs to be made by the minister. We understand that that is no longer the case, and that OSFI, our FSA equivalent, is looking at these applications on its own merits, like it would do an application from anywhere in the world. So assuming that they do that and they approve one or more of these applications on its own merits, then we expect to see this take off to some degree in the Canadian context. We already have HSBC in Canada, which is, depending on which way you want to look at it, Canada's 6th largest bank, or the largest foreign bank in Canada. And through their Amana window, they may offer Islamic finance products to Canadians. More credit unions and other mid-sized banks could offer home financing products, and one or more kind of made-in-Canada banks could start serving this population as well. As I said, there are a number of applications before the regulators. On the institutional side, and I won't get into this in too much detail, I think we are going to cover some of this tomorrow, but we are seeing a lot of activity in the institutional space as well. Not necessarily in the Islamic finance space. There's some talk of companies doing sukuks, but just on institutional side generally, either sovereign wealth funds or other companies out west, a lot of our crown jewels, be it Fairmont or Four Seasons or some oil and gas resource companies out west, are owned by Middle Eastern investors. So Canada is well known to the Middle East, and it's just a matter of time before a sukuk offering occurs by one or more corporates in Canada. So turning to page 19, if you're page 10, if you're following along on the slides, I think I just want to emphasize one thing here in terms of sukuks. It's been publicly stated that Ontario is mulling issuing a sovereign sukuk. Timing is up in the air, and so if that occurs, obviously that'll provide some sort of benchmark in terms of interest rates or the reference rate for other corporates to follow. Again, there was some talk about the UK government issuing a sukuk. That has taken a backseat for a number of reasons. But there are a number of Western jurisdictions. I understand Ireland also is looking to offer sukuk. But in Canada, Ontario certainly is interested in this and is looking at what's involved in issuing a sukuk. So then turning to page 11 or slide 11, what are the challenges and opportunities from a Canadian context? Obviously, the most important thing is getting the Canadian regulators comfortable. That is key. And to our knowledge, there is no evidence that Canadian regulators are looking at an entirely separate regulatory regime or approval process for these institutions. Some of the key issues that the regulators face are listed here. The extent to which the Sharia Supervisory Board might exercise some of the powers of the Board of Directors, and I understand the next panel consists of Sharia scholars. Perhaps they could address this.